So today our topic is Handel. The reason why we are discussing Handel's life in music appreciation and Baroque opera in opera appreciation is because the Met is very soon going to broadcast in the Met HD series Julius Caesar, an opera by Georg Friedrich Händel, and I thought it would be actually a great thing to combine the two classes to prepare us for this amazing production. Hopefully you won't miss it. It's at the end of the month, and I believe 27th, let me quick check. Yeah, 27th of April. And it's really a remarkable production because with Nathalie Bisset and David Daniels, one of the great countertenors we have today. So that's going to be a special treat, but I know that for many people Baroque music is not the easiest type of music to follow or to appreciate, and especially when it's an opera. Instrumental music is one thing, but then opera is another. So I'm hoping to contribute to a better understanding of this composer, the time, the styles, why they wrote certain music, how they did, etc., etc. So we will see how far we go. I have quite a lot of slides, and I think 49 slides. I think I was too optimistic. So let's see how far we get, and we can always continue next week. So first I would like to point out this quote by Beethoven. Handel is the greatest composer who ever lived. I would bare my head and kneel at his grave. Well, it's for several reasons quite an amazing quote. One, because Beethoven had quite a lot of musician friends, but I don't remember any other so euphoric quote how he was regarding other musicians. So this is one very remarkable fact. And then the other fact is when Beethoven was saying this in 1924, I believe, well, it was already much later than we see where no Baroque music was ever played again. The compositions of Johann Sebastian Bach and Georg Friedrich Händel were completely forgotten, and nobody paid attention to these two composers. It's quite unique that Beethoven knew about Händel's music, and he had studied what we call the counterpoint. He knew how to write a fugue, which is a very typical instrumental form for a composition form for this particular time. And Beethoven actually used many times. I was just the other day listening in the car to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and the last movement just before this glorious ending. There's one of the most fascinating fugues, Beethoven. And the reason why he knew how to write these type of Baroque compositions was because his teacher was very old-fashioned and had introduced him in young years when he was learning about music and composition in Bonn, the city Bonn, B-O-N-N. So he had learned about this particular composer. So he really thought not Mozart, not Haydn, but that Handel was the greatest composer. The general public did not listen at all to Baroque composers at the time. So even more remarkable that Beethoven was so fascinated with Handel. I, of course, can only agree. When we look, there's a lot of difference. We could actually have one entire class just discussing the difference between Handel and Bach. And well, Bach was not so cosmopolitan of a person. Bach was much more provincial. He had been growing up in northern Germany around basically Berlin and Leipzig. And never actually left this part of Germany, never traveled down to Italy or anything. So he was much more, well, he was a church musician for most of his life, and he pretty much visited just family members who lived in nearby other cities. So the Bach family, as you all know, was pretty spread out, but it was all in this particular part of Germany. Handel was a man of the world. He had traveled and spent several years in Italy. He was liked very good life, and so here's the list what really his amazing accomplishment. He was, of course, one of the greatest composers of the late Baroque era. As a German composer, German-born, but becomes one of the greatest composers of England. He was, as a court musician, also involved in putting on any of the performances. So he was what we would maybe nowadays call an impresario, and he knew how to negotiate the fees for singers, etc., etc. He was a generous philanthropist. He was an art collector, and I can tell you already, in those days Rembrandt paintings were already very expensive. He made and loved fortune and reinvented himself and again gained fortunes. So, but I will explain more later. And he was, what many people don't realize and know, is that he was one of the greatest organists, improviser on the organ, and keyboard player in general of his time. I mean, so remarkable that Johann Sebastian Bach was hoping to actually have a musical encounter with this composer. And so just to brush up his own prestige in Leipzig. Never did happen. We do know Handel traveled 3 times back to Germany after he had settled in England. And twice he kind of declined politely to Johann Sebastian Bach. And the 3rd time, Johann Sebastian Bach already had passed away in 1750. When several anecdotes are just really fun. So if you have any time to go into Blackboard, the slide here, maybe one of my favorite is maybe one of the lower ones. So if you see here, when a friend commented on the poor music being heard at Vauxhall Gardens, he answered, "You are right, sir. I thought so myself when I wrote it." So very, and then here's another anecdote which I thought was cute. When friends tried to console him on an empty house, he answered, "Never mind, the music will sound better," thinking of the acoustic. So people, of course, the acoustic changes. Empty halls are always much better. Talking about Handel as an organist, this is Covent Garden. Covent Garden, yes, it does go this far back to the Baroque era. And so as you can see, lots of people, there's not one seat empty. And this part is supposedly the organ of Georg Friedrich Handel. And it was placed permanently in those days in Covent Garden because there were many, many organ concerts. And he was so highly celebrated that they just left this huge organ in Covent Garden. I don't think there's an organ nowadays in Covent Garden. I haven't been there, but I don't see it on stage. About the composer, he was born in Halle. His father was a barber surgeon who didn't want his son to become a musician. He had a very different vision for his son. The father actually intended for Georg Friedrich to become a lawyer. We do know that he was brought up with music education. He learned how to play the organ and had early on good music instruction, and had quite accomplishment, but never it was intended to see that Handel was going to become a musician. And so let me maybe skip this. So we do know that he was enrolled in 1702 as really a law student in Halle, his hometown, at the university. He dropped shortly after out of this his studies and concentrated on music and became the organist of the cathedral in Halle. So that's quite remarkable. And I'm sure this is a picture of him later on in life, and this is where he apparently was a little bit younger. So he then left home in 1703 and went to very interesting city. Hamburg is one of the few cities which has actually well, it has a harbor. All the northern German coast, there's no harbor because of the low tides, and so it just is too insecure to bring ships in and out. So one of the only harbors we have really in Germany is in Hamburg. Now with East Germany, I don't even know nowadays. You see, I've so too long gone. But in Hamburg, because of the harbor, there were a lot of merchants. Merchants have money. Merchants are interested in art. And so some of the greatest theaters were built really in Hamburg in those days. There was public opera houses outside of Italy. One of the first opera houses outside of Italy was actually built in Hamburg. And that's quite was great for Handel because that's where he becomes the second violinist. So he is exposed to this genre. He accompanies, he's a member of the orchestra and learns about this new fascinating genre we call opera. And very soon he actually was promoted to become a harpsichordist, and he already starts not only playing, but also it sounds like he already started composing or thinking of composition. So eventually he's so interested in this new genre of opera that he feels an urge to travel down to Italy to learn more about opera. So he went to opera, and it was his luck that no other than one of the Medicis becomes his sponsor and patron. So he lived really in good style, had time for 5 or 6 years to really study the music of Italy. He not only studied opera, but all instrumental music. He became a dear friend of Corelli, one of the greatest violinists of his time. So really, not only he's absorbing the music, but he's already composing his operas. Even one of the operas, Agrippina, is premiered in Venice. So for a foreigner to see his opera premiered in a town like Venice was absolutely remarkable. So eventually he is returning back to Germany, and by that time his reputation already is anticipating him, and he is returning to the city of Hanover. Hanover is a city that is, again, had a court with a lot of elaborate art and music life. He becomes the court Kapellmeister, so he's basically in charge of all the music at this particular court. If it's orchestral, vocal, small ensembles, you name it. As a composer, as a director, so to say, he was really in charge. He then traveled to England. He got the permission from his employer, George, I don't know, it was the, I don't know with the title of this employer of his at that particular time when he was at the court in Hanover, I have to admit. So, but yeah, he received the permission to travel to England. But of course, he was not supposed to stay this long in England. So again, he is an extended stay in London, and really he's getting in trouble with his employer in Hanover, who said, well, I'm not paying you to entertain audiences in London. I want you here in Hanover. And it would have been fine because Queen Anne was very fond of Handel, and Handel loved it in London, but unfortunately Queen Anne died in 1714. And so eventually he returned to Hanover, had to make up with his employer. They did actually reconcile. And then it happens that through mysterious links, and I know it has something to do with Queen Elizabeth, who didn't have children, and then eventually again the House of Stuart was involved, and how George of Hanover becomes King George the First of England. He was a gentleman who didn't speak any English. He really was now eager to bring people who could communicate actually with his subjects in London. And so he brings Handel. And that was actually a very smart thing to do. Handel, of course, loved it. British people loved the new type of music he brought. They fell in love with Italian opera, this German composer brought. And in the meantime, Handel really adopted British citizenship and never went back except those 3 times he traveled back to his hometown. He received such recognition throughout his life that he received the rare honor to be buried in Westminster Abbey, where usually only the kings were buried. But there are few exceptions. Shakespeare and Henry Purcell are 2 exceptions, or Purcell. But Handel also was some, and here is the grave stone inside Westminster Abbey. This is also a cute anecdote I love. So when he in later years became blind, he was asked to perform with another blind organist. And then he said, well, Mr. Sharp, have you never read the scriptures? Do you not remember if the blind lead the blind, they both will fall into a ditch? So kind of good answer. So he had this dry humor and really wit on him. So this is supposedly here, this is a page from the Messiah. So this is to this day what works. And so that's what they decided to portray him in Westminster Abbey. So I think, let me quick, George, you have heard it already, and Tina, but I think the rest of the class would be really enjoying this.
Okay with me.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. Actually, good pieces of music I don't mind to hear twice, right?
Yes.
So this is an encore. These famous musicians play. They must have played, I'm assuming, a concerto, a double concerto for violin and viola. And they chose, usually as an encore you choose things like Paganini or something like this. But in this case, Handel is choosing, Perlman and Zuckerman choose a Passacaglia. So really remarkable. Let me know when it ends on your end. I'm going to mute the phone line. They keep telling me that I'm pushing the right buttons and it should work. So I don't know why it's not working. But if not, just put the phone far away and do turn please on the volume of your computers. And then when it has ended, don't forget to turn the volume of your computer back off. So here we go. Let me load it. And enjoy.
All guests have been muted.
Membership in the out-of-touch wireless carrier, awarding contracts, and data for congested networks, all on our advanced nationwide 4G network. Better choice. Friendly.
Hello? Hello? Oh, I don't know how loud the microphone.
All guests have been unmuted.
Hi everybody. I don't know why this was not working so well. And then suddenly I was hearing myself, like my microphone was turning on, but it was turned off. I checked and it was turned off. So I don't know. Mystery.
Claudia, you're small again, and in the middle of the screen it says Pilly.
Oh, I don't see. That's because I was the first one to come into the class. The first one is always on the screen. But then when normally when Claudia comes, then it disappears. But since Claudia's little, there I am. I'm sorry about that. It's not the thing I can do.
Yeah, so
Let me
I
try.
tried from my end. Oh, and we have an echo again, so let's double check. Keely, maybe click one time the magic microphone underneath the video.
Yes, I did. I don't.
Right?
Yeah.
And then maybe click one time the video and turn it right away off, because that's what's...
No, because I don't want to be there.
Oh, I know. But just one time click off, and then right away click twice there, and then turn it off. There, perfect. Is it large now? Well,
No. Now
No.
it is. Now it's fine.
oh, so we have to do this. So, well, really, I guess you have to comb your hair then before you come online. So then we do this trick. I don't know what logic is behind, but I have given up to really try to figure out. And I know technicians in the college who run entire computer labs in the district for the district, and they don't try to explain everything. All they're trying, as long as it works, fine. So that's all.
We did not see Pilly's picture, only the word Pilly.
I know, because she had it turned on, and I don't know why it keeps it always in the foreground then.
I'm sorry, it's not me. I promise. I don't want
I know it's not you. It's some funny setting. It's like when because I also don't turn off my video. I have an opportunity to actually just pause it, and I don't know, that apparently does the trick. So, but we fixed it, so we don't worry now.
Okay.
Let's continue with Handel. So Handel is very happily with his King George in England. Many times the king, I have here actually a nice picture of the king. There we have a nice stately picture of King George I. So he actually had quite some trouble in his reign in England. It was not a happy marriage between him and England. He never learned how to speak English, and he on many occasions kind of took advantage, as what we nowadays would call PR, to kind of find some positive impact with the people in England. So it was very wonderful how this king actually inspired so much great compositions. Very few people know that he wrote 50 operas and oratorios altogether. And nowadays we hear Messiah, Julius Caesar, and then there's maybe 2 or 3 other operas. And not that many other oratorios we either don't hear. We kind of have decided we love Messiah, and that's the one we are going to listen to. But really interesting that this composer was very successful, and he wrote until actually he had spent some time outside of London, and when he returned back to London, the British had in the meantime enjoyed the Beggar's Opera by John Gay. And so John Gay became the big competition of Handel, to such a degree that they had, one theater, Handel's set, and it was empty, and John Gay was in the other theater, and it was packed. So that's when, you remember in the beginning I said he gained fortune and suddenly he lost them. That's the moment right now I'm talking about, when he lost all his fortune. And he had to literally reinvent himself, and what he really did was he started writing oratorios. That was, and that's really where England again fell in love with him and his music, and that's to this day lasting. And really he regained his fortunes, his prestige, and again was successful until the end of his life. So a really amazing story, this composer, how he was able to really survive. And that's very hard even for musicians nowadays. So here, one thing I would like to point also out, that he was the founder of the Royal Academy of Music, and that's really remarkable accomplishment. Not many really conservatories existed in those days. There was Paris, I believe, already existing, Bologna, and London. There was none in Germany yet. That's much later. Mendelssohn, for example, formed the one in Leipzig. To this day it's called the Mendelssohn Conservatory. Like I studied at the Robert Schumann Conservatory, which was, Schumann is again 19th century. So much later. Let's hear some of his concerto grossi, which are so wonderful, and I hope I'm catching here the right piece of music. Let's give it one more try if today music is playing well. So here we go.
All guests have been unmuted.
No matter why you want a better brain, Moxie.com can help. It's like a personal trainer for your brain, improving your performance with science and neuroplasticity in a way that just feels like games. Start training with Moxie.com right now and discover what your brain can do.
Question.
All guests have been unmuted.
Question. Did they play straight for 2 hours and 40 minutes?
Oh, they played actually more because
all at once? All in one concert?
Could be. Yeah, they have marathons. I don't know if you saw the BBC proms every year. If you look up online on YouTube, you will find quite a lot of them. A lot of them are focusing just on Handel. And yes, yet you play over 2-hour concerts, yeah, with encores. That's not unusual. And then they, I know that when you're on tour, excuse me, there was many times then as an artist you have to sign CDs afterwards, so you don't get back to the hotel room until 1:30 or something. But if there's a reception, a dinner, and then you travel in the morning to the next city, and you get hopefully enough rest and food, so you can perform the same program the next evening. So that's yeah, that's basically what musicians do, concert artists. Yeah. Let me quick drink a sip of water. Well, what's also astonishing, what we learn about the water music, the water music, that's 3 suites. And when you play them all, usually you hear only the most famous movements. But the whole water music suite, 3 of them, is, I did the math, I forgot how long each of the suites is, but what we know that King George asked the musicians to repeat it, they played 5 hours straight.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I wonder if some of them ended up with actually some hand problems. I hope not. But that apparently was the big problem in those days. Yeah, and there's many. I added a few other ones. So by the way, when you click on these little CDs, nothing is going to happen. That's just when a few years ago I prepared CDs, and I have the CD, it has to be in my computer, and then when I click on it there will be music. But when you click on them, when you look in Blackboard, nothing is going to happen. I just left it. It's too much time just to take all those CDs out. So just ignore them. So always look for the YouTube link like we have here. I added quite a few of the Concerto Grossi, and there's some very exciting recordings too. So just enjoy to have an evening with Handel. But altogether, he achieved the fame, fortune by bringing first operas in the Italian style to England. Then he also became very well known for his amazing instrumental music. Those Concerto Grossis were very popular. So Concerto Grossi, we talked a little bit in our music class on Tuesday about it. So roughly it's where you put a contrast between a small group of instrumentalists and the whole orchestra. And that, of course, between small group and full group, you have a dynamic, drastic contrast. And that's basically what Concerto Grossi were about, that you have these dynamic contrasts. So yes, and it's an amazing keyboardist, was a famous improviser, and yeah, and he played the great oratorios. So those are all his great accomplishments. And what's striking that usually when we have such a groundbreaking composer, we think that they also invent new things. Not Bach, not Handel did invent ever a new composition form. Haydn, for example, did. Berlioz, yes, he did. Franz Liszt, yes, he did. But not Handel. Handel and Bach basically picked up the forms which were popular during his time. If Concerto Grossi were in fashion, that's what he composed. He didn't bother trying to reinvent some things. So, but then, of course, he brought these compositions to great mastery and beauty, and that's really what his great fame was about. Usually Italian composer dominated a lot, even in northern Germany, the music scene. At German courts, I know there was because I studied and wrote my master's thesis about a Baroque composer, and I looked at the a general payroll list of this particular court. And there were a lot of Italian musicians who traveled up north to find employment. And that's really was the big competition for German, French, and English musicians. And so Handel did pretty well among all these Italian musicians, together with Bach and Telemann. And so the water music and the Royal Fire music works, that's still to this day played a lot. And the organ concertos I wish would be more known, but unfortunately they're not. But very remarkable. But maybe it's because we don't go to the cathedral and listen to much organ concerts. Anybody has a comment or a question? So I was wondering.
No,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I said a great evening. Wonderful, very exciting.
Yeah, and if you like, I can start one of the, I'm trying to find the water music, but I must have hidden it. So here there's all these great orchestras, and every year it's all these wonderful, these are some coronation anthems. That was every time King George would go to one of his other castles, and every time he would come back to London, some special work had to be composed. And so, there's all these, they call it the coronation anthems. They were not just for the moment of the coronation, but every time King George came back to town. And those are pretty amazing. And this is also a fabulous group. So they're called the 16 because there's 16 of them playing. But I think for this concert, they expanded their orchestra. So did the other prom concerts. So let me play a little bit for you. And I can leave it on so you can enjoy it for the rest of the evening. Do you have any comments or questions?
No, I always think of one thing which bothers me, this kind of muse on command, when the great musicians had to create for a special evening, whatever. And how can one be creative, by a command of someone else who wants to have something for this very evening?
And very good point, Pili, because in those days they had to produce a lot of music. Even Haydn was still a court musician. And literally it was like we turned on the record player, or nowadays YouTube. You go, oh, I like to hear this tonight, and now I like to hear this. That's how, the counts and kings went to their court musicians and said, oh, tonight I have special guests. Why don't you compose for tonight an extra string quartet? So
how is it possible? I don't understand how is it possible. It's almost an insult to a musician, to a composer.
Well, musicians in those days were considering themselves much more craftsmen.
Yes.
One other thing they did is that even Bach or Handel, they reused a lot of their compositions. They literally stole from themselves and from others. Like there's Bach, even though Johann Sebastian Bach never traveled to Italy, never heard the music live of Vivaldi, for example, but he got a hold of scores and read some of the music of Vivaldi, and then wrote his own variation of the Vivaldi concertos. And I had actually one time a class on these concertos, Vivaldi's version and then Bach's version. It's really fascinating. So composers also, they had, suites and concerto grossi, and then maybe the count would say, I sent you to this and this wedding. My cousin is getting married, and I want to send him my best musicians to the wedding. Why don't you go and play in his wedding? And so it was really that musicians had to constantly come up for certain, like you say, certain occasions and to provide appropriate music for that occasion. Weddings, funerals, coronations, you name it. So what they often did was take a movement from here, take a movement from there, and just really mix things up as they needed. What we do today, that we think the Symphony No. 9 can only stay together. Well, in those days they would have taken a movement 1 from Symphony No. 3 and movement 2 from Symphony No. 7. So basically they jumbled up things as they needed. And so that allowed them also to be more productive. Pieces were also, there were very rigid rules how to compose, but when you followed those rules, then you already had a pretty solid skeleton. So then you add the music and the notes and the melodies, and then basically you can, like Bach never thought of himself the artist with a great inspiration. He thought of him as a hardworking craftsman. And proof is really that he wrote for 4 entire years, for every single Sunday, a new cantata. There are 200, almost over 200 cantatas. That means with we have 52 weeks. There were certain Sundays where there were special holidays, so where you wrote even something more elaborate. But pretty much there's cantatas for 4 years. And so that is aside from the organ composition, aside from the instrumental music. And yes, Bach went works he had written in an earlier appointment and employment, he reused and then just transcribed them, so to say, arranged them for other instruments that that particular occasion was calling for. So many times it's the same composition in an instrumental version, in a choral version, and in an organ version. So we see that a lot. Like I used to play a suite on my guitar by Johann Sebastian Bach, which Bach wrote not only for the lute, but also for the cello and also for the organ. It was the same composition with some modification and variation, but roughly it was the same piece. So on one occasion, maybe it was the occasion happened in the church, so he played it on the organ. Another occasion, he had to play it on the violin. And another time, he was lucky he had a lutenist around. So that's what, they're much more practical they had to be. And this image, what you were also implying that we are musicians with inspirations, that really comes from much later times. 19th century. Musicians like Paganini and Liszt created that. Yeah. Good comment. Yeah, thank you. Any other comment? Or, we are already over time? And I think
yes.
I'm needing, yes. So I say goodbye to everybody, and I will load the video. And then here in the, actually what's better if I put it in, oops, didn't copy. I have to go back and copy it. So I'm going to copy it into the chat window, and if you click on the chat window, it will open automatically a browser and you can play it. So here's the video, and then I don't have to keep this course shell all the time open, and you can hear it independent from our session. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful evening. and enjoy the rest of the evening with Handel music.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, Claudia.
Bye, Tina. Bye, Peely. Bye, George. And bye, Laura.
Bye, bye, bye.
And here we go.